So, inside of Visio or whatever you want to use, let's go ahead and make a new file. So let's go to Visio, make a new file, and like I said, I recommend turning the landscape orientation to landscape, but not certainly requiring that. So last class we did an employees ERD, correct? How about we do a bank ERD this time? All right. So let's brainstorm which entities we may need. So we're a bank. That means we have what? Customer. Customers have what? Account. And what else do we need to know? Those are the main two. We could, if we want to, throw employee information in here. I think that's enough to get started. So we have customer and we have account. Let's think about this relationship a little bit. Okay, so we have a customer entity. We have an account entity. Probably also need a transaction, don't we? So customer, they can have multiple accounts, right? To be a customer, is it fair to say they have to have an account? Pretty hard to be a customer if you don't have an account. So let's do one to many. Okay, but account can belong to multiple people, right? All right, think about a married couple. All right, they have a joint account maybe. The account belongs to multiple customers. Think about a business. Multiple customers can access a business account potentially. So that's what type of relationship? Many to many. So like we were saying, we got to address this with an associative entity. Okay, so somewhere, I guess this is going to do for now. We're going to call this cust account. So let's add this to our list of entities. And the idea is this is going to be an associative entity. It's going to have a relationship with customer. It's going to have a relationship with account. Okay, so customer has one-to-many customer accounts, but a cust account is going to have cust ID acting as both a primary and a foreign key, because that comes from right here, correct? Okay, so they're getting customer ID, and they also have to get the primary key from account. So each account is going to have what? An account number, right? Whoops, this is not a foreign key over here. Okay. So account may have one-to-many customer accounts, but customer account, because it has account number right here, belongs to one and only one account. Same thing over here. Customer ID is present, so it belongs to one and only one customer. So let's say that we had a customer, let's say we had an account, and let's say that it was owned by husband and wife. All right, so the husband and wife jointly own an account. So that account is actually going to have two records for cust account. So let's say that the husband's account, husband's customer ID number is 1000. Let's say the wife is 1001. All right, and let's say the account number, let's say that is going to be 1 million. I'm obviously making these numbers up, okay? That's 10 million. Either way, doesn't matter. All right, so what we're going to see for cust account, we're going to have two instances of it for this specific account. So the first instance is going to look like this. Okay, so we have our different columns. We have cust ID, and then we have account number. Can everyone hear me, by the way? I know I'm not facing the audience as much as I'd like to. All right, so this is what it's going to look like. So we take the husband, 1000, that's his ID for the customer ID. We take the account number. So that's 10 million. That is our first instance of cust account. Our second instance of cust account is going to be the wife. So we take 1001, same 10 million for the account number. All right? We can do that. Does that make sense? That's how we tie an account to multiple people. Any questions? So everyone understands how we do associative entities. Again, if there's a many-to-many relationship present, every entity involved, we add an associative entity. So if we had 3 entities involved, we would just add another primary key from whatever the third entity was. Take the primary key from every entity involved, plop it in the associative entity. Those are also going to be, of course, primary keys. They're going to form what type of primary key, though? It's going to be a composite key, right? Because we know we have multiple attributes that define the primary key. So that's what we're doing there. Is that enough information to get started? I think so. 4 entities. So, call our first entity customer. All right. We already said we're going to assign a unique ID to every customer. Sarbanes-Oxley. Who's a big fan of Sarbanes-Oxley in here? Anyone? Yeah, who likes it? Okay. You're shaking your head, Julie? Do you like it? All right, who's a fan of Sarbanes-Oxley? Well, no one's a fan of Sarbanes-Oxley. Well, anyway, I was hoping someone would be a big fan of it so they could tell us all the information we need for a banking customer. Do you like it, Alicia? So, like I was talking about last class, whenever you're creating a new file, just go to New, and then you might have to search for it, but just use crow's foot database notation. All right. So, we know we need to know the customer's name, including their middle name. We know we need to know their social security number, their date of birth, and address, that sort of thing. So, let's call this F name. Let's call this M name. Let's add a bunch of attributes. And I will make the text a little bit larger once we've finished creating this. But for now, it's a little bit easier to not have the text be quite so large. So I'm going to grab a couple more attributes here, and they'll be good. All right, so we have L name. We talked about date of birth. We need to know their phone, probably their email. Social security number, that's exactly right. And now we need to add their address. And then city, state, and zip. And that's, of course, going to be broken down into single atomic values, so that way we can more easily run queries once we begin to actually make this into a real table. So city, state, zip. All right, is everyone with me on the attributes for customer? Is anyone lost? Yeah. What do you mean make it bigger? Are you trying to add attributes? Is that what you're asking? So you just go over to the fields, and you just drag the field into here, and then you have a new attribute. Yeah. You might have to search for it. Is there like a search or something? Just go to new. Click right there. Using the online version. Yeah, go to your search, type in Visio. So there, when you go to new, you should be able to search for templates there. So it's gonna be crow's foot. Other questions? Yeah. So yeah, I'll also make the text bigger on these once we're finished. All right. Let's come over here and let's make a count. So we know that we're a bank. And we know that accounts can be what? Are all accounts the same? Okay, so we have different types of accounts. All right, so we have checking, we have savings, we have credit card, mortgage, business accounts. You know, depending on how large of a bank we are, we may have 10 or 15 different types of checking accounts. Does that make sense? Account type handles that. That's going to be one of the attributes. All right. Probably want to know the starting balance. Because the idea here is we're going to have an entity for transaction. So the transaction entity is going to tell us each and every transaction that took place, but if we don't have the starting balance, we don't know what the current balance is without having a starting balance. Does that make sense? And I think that's probably enough to get started with a count. So again, we have an account number. Let's just call it ACCT num. Actually, ACCT no. No is shorter. All right, we said we're going to have the account type. And we're going to have starting balance. All right, why don't I have current balance in here? So there's really not a good reason to constantly have a current balance stored when we instead know what we started with and we know every transaction that took place. There's no reason to have a current balance stored. It's not wrong if you do. It's just it's taking a lot more processing power to every time there's a transaction to update something. Does that make sense? So it would still work though with that. So now we have our associative entity. All right, we called that account our cust account, right? Cust account, and we know we're going to have primary and foreign key for cust ID and account number. Cust ID, account no. All right, I'm just going to move this line down. All you have to do is just click on the line. You can move it up and down with the arrows. Pretty straightforward. So we're going to set both of these as both primary and foreign keys. Okay? So we actually don't need this third attribute down here. Whoops. All right, and the idea here is that we can easily tie in an account to a customer. So instead of having account number as a foreign key inside a customer, or instead of having customer ID as a foreign key in account, we put the foreign keys here, and that's how we tie them together. Does that make sense? Question? Right click, and you'll have an option to set foreign key and set as primary key. I can take a look at it with you after class. Okay. So we also need a transaction table, or a transaction entity. Let's call it transaction. And let's call this TID for transaction ID. Because the idea is each transaction is going to have a unique identification associated with it. All right. So a transaction is going to have what components? We need to know what account it's coming from. We need to know what account it's going to. We need to know the amount. What else do we need to know? The date and the time. Exactly. Okay? So we're going to do account from, and we're going to do account to. Now, I think I've mentioned this before, but your primary keys do not have to share, or your foreign keys do not have to share the same name with what they come from. So both of these are referencing the account number, even though they're not called account number. Does that make sense? So let's just add on a couple more attributes here. Okay, so we'll call this TAMT for transaction amount. And we'll call this TDate for the date of the transaction. And also TTime for the time of the transaction. All right. Is everyone with me on making the entities? Any questions? Let's add in some relationships. So I'm just kind of haphazardly placing them, then I'll connect them up later. All right, so we know we have a relationship between customer and cust account. So let's actually come down here and let's do that. So just snap it wherever you can. Try to snap it to the outside of the entity. All right, so customer has one-to-many cust account, but a cust account belongs to one and only one customer. Whoops. One thing I don't like about Visio, it's not really clear which is which. So you have begin and end. It doesn't really tell you by looking at it which is begin and which is end. I would like it if they labeled this B and that E, but they don't. So I'll make some mistakes here and there with that. All right, so I think it's the end symbol then that is going to be one or more. Yeah, because the idea is that customers can have multiple accounts, therefore they can have multiple cust accounts. But a particular cust account record is going to belong to one and only one customer. All right, same type of thing with cust account and account. Okay, so we have cust account belongs to one and only one account. And an account has one-to-many cust accounts. All right, so that's all we're doing. We're just adding in that relationship. And lastly, we have account and transaction. So I'm just going to grab this, attach it here, grab this, and attach it here. Now I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here. And I'm going to assume that transaction belongs to one and only one account. Technically speaking, you'd make a very strong argument because it has two different accounts there. It doesn't. But I'm going to cheat a little bit and assume it does. Is that fair? So we're saying transaction belongs to one and only one account. Account has one-to-many transactions. All right. And that's a basic bank ERD. Any questions about it? Lisa. I think this is a lot more clear because PK stands for primary key, whereas asterisk could be used for many other things. So I would suggest, sticking with PK and FK. I will say I require that if you don't stick with PK and FK, you put a key in. So if you're handwriting, for instance, you don't want to write PK and FK, just like somewhere on here, just type, or just like put a key, and then you would say asterisk stands for primary key. And whenever you stood for foreign key, so maybe you did like an apostrophe or something, that would be your foreign key. Does that make sense? But if you stick with PK and FK, you don't have to add a key because I know what those are. And I think anyone reading it would know what they are as well. All right. Let's see, we have under 20 minutes left. So I'm not sure that we'll have time to get finished on the next ERD we want to do. Do you guys want to get started on it and see where we end? Or would you all rather pick it up Wednesday if you want to see another ERD? Or if you don't want to see another ERD, just go have a weekend. What do you guys think? Who votes to end class right now? Who votes to do another example? But we probably won't be able to finish it. I don't see any hands, so we'll go with ending class right now. If you want to see another example of an ERD, come to class on Wednesday. If not, I'll see you Monday. Or today's Friday, right? Yeah. So I'll see you Monday either way, I guess. Have a great weekend. Don't forget to read the article. Also, make sure I end up with those little slips.